The wind didn't just howl that evening. It screamed. It came rushing down the mountain in violent waves, slamming into the car from the side, rattling the doors, making the entire vehicle shudder like it was something fragile and temporary, like it didn't belong there at all. Snow flew sideways, thick and blinding, hitting the windshield so hard it sounded like handfuls of gravel thrown again and again. The world beyond the glass had disappeared, replaced by endless white and shadow. I slowed the car instinctively, my hands tightening around the steering wheel until my knuckles burned. Every muscle in my body was tense, alert, waiting for something to go wrong. The road beneath us had narrowed to little more than a suggestion. The yellow lines were gone. The edge of the mountain road was gone. There was only snow and the vague memory of where asphalt was supposed to be. The heater was blasting, but it wasn't enough. Cold crept in anyway, slipping through the seams of the doors, crawling up my legs, settling deep into my chest. Each breath felt sharper than the last. Beside me sat Evelyn Carter, my boss. Even now, stranded on a mountain in the middle of a sudden blizzard, she looked composed. Her back was straight, her hands rested calmly in her lap. Her coat was perfectly buttoned, her hair neatly pulled back, untouched by panic or fear. She stared out the windshield, eyes focused, calculating. She had always been like this. At the office, Evelyn Carter didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. She spoke calmly, precisely, and people listened. Meetings went quiet when she entered the room. Mistakes felt heavier under her gaze. Compliments were rare, measured, and earned. To me, she was distant, professional, untouchable, the kind of person you never imagined seeing vulnerable. "The visibility seems worse," she said calmly, as if commenting on a chart during a presentation. I let out a slow breath. Yeah, it came in fast. The weather report hadn't mentioned this. Light snow, they'd said, manageable. We'd left the conference center that afternoon expecting a normal drive back to Denver. I'd been assigned to drive because my company car had better winter tires, and because, unspoken but understood, I was dependable. Now, the mountain didn't care about any of that. The GPS screen flickered. Once. Then went black. I tapped it once, then again. Nothing. "No signal," I muttered. Evelyn turned her head slightly, eyes flicking to the dark screen, then back to the road. "How far are we from the main highway?" I swallowed. "I'm not sure anymore." That's when it happened. The tires lost their grip. There was no dramatic spin, no sudden violence, just a sickening, slow slide as the car drifted sideways, gravity pulling us where the road no longer existed. My heart jumped into my throat. I turned the wheel carefully, trying not to overcorrect, every instinct screaming at me to do something, anything. But the ice had already decided. The car slid into a packed snowbank with a dull, heavy thud. The engine stalled. The silence afterward was shocking. No wind inside, no engine hum, just the muffled roar of the storm outside and the sound of my own breathing, loud and uneven. I tried the ignition. Click. Nothing. I tried again. Click. Dead. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The car rocked gently as the wind pushed against it, as if reminding us how small we were up here. Snow piled quickly against the doors, creeping higher with every passing second. "Are we stranded?" Evelyn asked. Her voice was quiet, controlled, but something underneath it had changed. I looked out into the white nothingness. No headlights behind us, no signs, no road, just endless snow swallowing everything whole. "Yes," I said softly. "I think we are." The word hung between us, heavy and final. Stranded. Without thinking, I unbuckled my seatbelt and pulled off my coat. I reached across the console and held it out to her. She frowned. "You'll need that." "I'll manage," I said quickly. "You should take it." She hesitated, eyes searching my face as if weighing whether to argue. Finally, she took it and pulled it around herself. "Thank you," she said. It was such a simple word, And yet I realized I'd never heard her say it like that before. Staying in the car wasn't an option. Even with the doors closed, the cold was winning. The engine wouldn't restart, and the snow would bury us long before morning. I squinted through the windshield, scanning the storm. Then I saw it, just barely, a dark shape. "There," I said, pointing. "I think there's a cabin." She followed my gaze. "Are you sure?" "No," I admitted, "but it's our best chance." We stepped out into the storm together. The cold hit instantly, like a physical force, stealing the air from my lungs. The wind screamed past us, snow stinging my face, blinding me. Each step forward felt like wading through cement. I stayed close to her, one arm slightly out, guiding her through the drifts. At one point, her foot slipped on hidden ice. She gasped, stumbling, and I caught her, steadying her before she fell. Her gloved hand gripped my arm tightly. She didn't let go right away. The cabin was old, weather-beaten, but standing. The door resisted at first, frozen stiff, then gave way with a loud crock. We stumbled inside and slammed it shut behind us, blocking out the storm as best we could. The silence inside was almost overwhelming. It wasn't warm, but it was shelter, and for that moment, that was everything. The door shut behind us with a hollow, echoing thud, and for a moment, neither of us moved. The sudden quiet felt unreal after the violence of the storm. Outside, the wind still screamed, still battered the walls like it wanted in. But in here, it was muted, distant, like we'd stepped into another world entirely. My ears rang from the sudden absence of sound. I could hear my own breathing, heavy and uneven, and hers too, softer but just as unsteady. The cabin was darker than I'd expected. The windows were small and clouded, barely letting in the dim gray light filtering through the storm. Dust floated in the air, disturbed by our entrance, catching what little light there was. The smell hit me next. Old wood, cold stone, something faintly musty, like time itself had settled into the walls. Evelyn stood just inside the door, arms wrapped tightly around herself, my coat pulled close. Her shoulders were drawn in, her posture no longer the sharp, commanding presence I knew from boardrooms and meetings. She looked smaller, not weak, just human. "We should check the place," she said quietly. I nodded. "Yeah." My boots echoed softly as I took a few careful steps inside. The cabin was simple. One main room, a small table with 2 chairs, a narrow bed pushed against the far wall, and a stone fireplace that looked like it hadn't been used in years. There were no lights, no electricity, just us and whatever we could make work. I crouched near the fireplace, brushing away a layer of ash and dust. Beneath it, I saw blackened stone and the remains of old logs. This might work, if we can get a fire going. Her eyes followed my movements, hope flickering there despite her effort to stay composed. "Is there wood?" I glanced toward a corner near the wall. "Yeah, looks like someone stocked some a long time ago." It felt like a small miracle. My fingers were stiff as I gathered the wood, each movement slow and deliberate. The cold made everything harder, thinking, moving, even breathing. I could feel it in my joints, deep and sharp. Still, I worked carefully, stacking smaller pieces first, then larger ones, the way my father had taught me years ago. Evelyn knelt nearby, watching, and surprised me by reaching out to help, handing me a piece of wood without a word. "Thanks," I murmured. She nodded, lips pressed together, as if conserving warmth, energy, maybe courage. When the fire finally caught, it wasn't dramatic, just a small flicker at first, a hesitant flame licking at the wood, but slowly, steadily, it grew. The crackle filled the room, soft but comforting. Warmth began to spread, faint at first, then stronger as the minutes passed. Evelyn let out a breath she'd clearly been holding and sank down onto the floor near the fireplace, sitting cross-legged, hands extended toward the heat. I sat nearby, leaving space between us, instinctively maintaining the professional distance that had always defined our relationship. Outside, the storm raged. Minutes passed in silence. The kind that isn't awkward, just heavy, full of thoughts neither person knows how to say out loud. "I don't like this," she said suddenly. I looked at her. "The storm?" She shook her head slightly. "Not knowing. I've always known what comes next. Meetings, deadlines, outcomes. Even failures were predictable." She stared into the fire. "This isn't." I nodded. "Yeah, I get that." She glanced at me then, studying my face as if seeing it for the first time. "You're very calm." "I'm not. I'm just used to dealing with things as they come." "Still," she said softly, "that matters." The firelight danced across her features, softening the sharp lines I associated with her. Without her tailored suit, without the office lights and authority, she looked different. Tired, cold, vulnerable in a way I'd never imagined. We both noticed the bed at the same time. It was narrow, old, a thin mattress stretched across a wooden frame. No blankets, no pillows, just bare necessity. I swallowed. "I'll take the floor." She looked at me sharply. "You already gave me my coat." "I'm fine," I said automatically, though my teeth were starting to chatter. She stood, pacing a few steps, then stopped, her back to me. I could see the tension in her shoulders, the way she held herself like someone used to carrying responsibility alone. "There's only one bed," she said quietly. I waited. Then she continued, her voice lower now, almost hesitant. "We need to stay warm." The words landed softly, without implication, without demand, just truth. I met her eyes when she turned around. There was no authority there, no hierarchy, just a woman facing the same reality I was. "Okay," I said, "but we do this respectfully, just to get through the night." She nodded. "Of course." We lay down fully clothed, stiff and careful, leaving a small space between us. The mattress dipped slightly under our combined weight. The fire was still burning, but the cold pressed in relentlessly, creeping along the floor, the walls, the air itself. At first, neither of us spoke. The storm outside seemed endless, the wind howling like a warning, like a reminder of how fragile we were. Minutes stretched into something longer. I could feel the cold seeping into my back, my legs, my arms. Then I felt it, her shivering. It was subtle at first, then stronger, her body trembling despite her effort to control it. Without thinking, I shifted closer, closing the space between us just enough to share warmth. She stiffened for a second, then relaxed. "Thank you," she whispered. We lay there close but careful, two people bound not by circumstance alone, but by an unspoken agreement to protect each other. My arm rested near hers, not touching, but close enough to share heat. Her breathing slowly steadied. Time moved differently then, slower, softer. She spoke again after a long pause. "When I was young, being cold meant something bad was about to happen." I turned my head slightly. "What do you mean?" "My family moved a lot. Sometimes we didn't have heat, sometimes we didn't know where we'd be the next month." She swallowed. Control became survival. I listened, saying nothing, giving her space to continue if she wanted. I promised myself I'd never be powerless again, that I'd never need anyone. Her voice wavered on the last word. I stared up at the ceiling, listening to the fire crackle. Needing people doesn't make you weak, it just makes you human. She was silent for a long time. Then, almost to herself, she said, "I wish I'd learned that sooner." The storm raged on outside, but inside the cabin, something shifted. The cold was still there, the danger was still real, but there was warmth too, not just from the fire, but from understanding, from shared vulnerability. Eventually, exhaustion claimed us. Not fully asleep, just drifting, aware of each other's presence, of each breath, of the simple fact that we were not alone. And for the first time since the blizzard began, that felt like enough. Morning didn't arrive all at once. It crept in slowly, cautiously, as if even the daylight was unsure whether it was safe to return to the mountain.
At first, there was only a subtle change in the darkness, a thinning of shadows, a soft gray light pressing gently against the edges of the cabin windows. The fire in the fireplace had burned down to embers sometime during the night, the warmth fading little by little until the cold reclaimed the room. I became aware of it gradually, the way you do when waking from a shallow sleep, every sense returning in fragments. The cold was the first thing I felt. The second was the steady rhythm of breathing beside me. For a moment, I didn't move. I didn't open my eyes. I just lay there, listening, to the faint crackle of dying embers, to the wind outside that no longer screamed but still whispered through the trees, and to the quiet human sound of someone else sharing the same fragile space. Evelyn was still asleep. I could tell by the evenness of her breath, the way her body had relaxed against the mattress sometime in the night. We weren't touching, not really, but we were close enough that the warmth we'd shared hadn't fully disappeared. That simple closeness, born not of choice but of necessity, had carried us through the coldest hours. Carefully, I shifted, testing my stiff muscles. My back protested. My legs felt heavy, numb in places. I flexed my fingers slowly, wincing as sensation returned in sharp pins and needles. Evelyn stirred slightly but didn't wake. I sat up, rubbing my hands together, then held them near the embers, coaxing what little warmth remained. Outside, the storm had softened into something quieter. The violent wind from the night before was gone, replaced by a stillness that felt almost reverent. The mountain, it seemed, was catching its breath. I stood and moved toward the window, brushing frost from the glass with my sleeve. The world beyond was transformed. Snow lay thick and untouched, smooth as a blank page. Trees bowed under its weight, their branches heavy and white. The road, what little of it I could see, was completely buried, but the sky had cleared. Pale blue stretched overhead, the sun low but present, casting light across the frozen landscape. It was beautiful in a way that almost hurt. We had survived the night. That realization settled into my chest slowly, deeply, bringing with it a mix of relief and exhaustion that left me momentarily unsteady. I leaned against the wall, closing my eyes, letting out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding since the car had slid off the road. Behind me, I heard movement. I turned just as Evelyn sat up, blinking, clearly disoriented for a second. She took in the cabin, the cold light, the remnants of the fire, and then her eyes found me. "Oh," she said softly. "Morning," I replied. She pulled my coat tighter around herself, then paused as if suddenly aware of how close we'd been sleeping. For a brief moment, something unreadable passed over her face, surprise perhaps, or reflection, but it vanished just as quickly. "Is the storm?" she asked. "It's past, at least the worst of it." She stood carefully, testing her legs, then joined me by the window. We stood there side by side, silent, looking out at the mountain bathed in morning light. "I didn't think we'd make it through the night," she said finally. "Neither did I admitted. She glanced at me then, really looked at me, her expression serious but softened by something warmer than I was used to seeing. "You took care of me. You didn't have to." I shrugged slightly. "That's what people do, or at least what they should do." She nodded slowly. "I've spent a long time believing the opposite." We didn't talk much after that. There wasn't nothing urgent to say. We conserved energy, relit the fire just enough to warm our hands, and waited. Hours passed quietly, marked only by the shifting light outside and the slow return of sensation to our bodies. Sometime around midday, we heard it, the distant hum of an engine. We froze, listening. It came again, closer this time. Relief hit me so hard my knees felt weak. "They're here," I said, Evelyn's eyes filled instantly, though she blinked the tears away quickly as if catching herself. I didn't think I'd be so glad to hear a snowplow. We stepped outside together, waving, shouting, our voices hoarse but strong enough to carry. The rescue crew spotted us quickly. They asked questions, wrapped us in blankets, helped us towards warmth and safety. As we were led away from the cabin, I glanced back once more. It stood there quietly, unchanged, already beginning to disappear into memory. Just another forgotten structure on a mountain that had tested us and, in some way, taught us something too. The drive back was silent at first. Exhaustion settled over both of us, heavy and unavoidable. Evelyn sat beside me in the rescue vehicle, staring out the window as the snow-covered landscape passed by. "I'm going to request that you take the rest of the week off," she said suddenly. I turned, surprised. "You don't have to do that." "I know, but I want to." There was a pause. "And," she added, "when you come back, I'd like to talk about your future at the company." My heart skipped. In a good way? A small smile touched her lips. In a very good way. Back at work, things didn't magically become easy. Deadlines still existed, expectations remained high. Evelyn was still strict, still precise, still demanding excellence. But something fundamental had changed. She listened more. She acknowledged effort. And sometimes, rarely, quietly, she smiled. One afternoon, weeks later, she stopped by my desk. No audience, no formality. "You handled that night with integrity," she said. "I trusted you when I don't trust easily." "I'm glad you did," I replied. She nodded. "So am I." She walked away then, heels clicking softly against the floor, leaving behind a feeling I couldn't quite name. Respect, maybe, or understanding, or simply the comfort of knowing that in a world full of titles and hierarchies, there are moments when none of that matters. Every winter now, when the first heavy snow begins to fall, I think of that mountain, of the blizzard that took everything familiar away, of the night when survival depended not on authority or strength, but on kindness, selflessness, and the quiet power of shared humanity. And I remember how in the coldest place I've ever been, warmth came from the simplest thing of all, not being alone.